What's next for the sports card market? Are things cooling down, or could we see a big surge in prices again soon? I've called 6 experts to get their predictions, and you need to hear what they have to say.
My name is Geoff Wilson. By day, I invest in tech companies, and at night, I invest in sports cards. Join me and my team as we help you profit from the hobby we all love.
Hello, sports card investors. Here we are, about 5 months into the year 2022, and it has been an interesting year for the sports card market so far. January started off really hot, bolstered especially by football cards, and in particular Joe Burrow's cards, which set the hobby on fire. But since then, we've seen ultra-modern cards across most sports decline. Base cards and high population cards, which were beat up in value badly last year, we've seen that trend continue this year, and those types of cards continue to fall in price. But there have been some very bright spots for the sports card market this year as well. We've seen high-grade 1980s cards perform well. We've seen high-end vintage cards do well. In fact, a lot of really high-end cards across the market have set record prices this year. And even with ultra-modern, even though cards from the last few years for the most part have been on decline, there have been some high-end cards from the last few years which have pushed upwards. We've also seen certain emerging segments of the hobby do really well this year. F1 cards and WWE cards, for example. But the big question is, where do we go from here? Is the card market going to continue to cool in a lot of segments? Or could prices across the board surge as we head into the summer national and the fall sports season? In a moment, I'm going to share the thoughts of 6 of the most knowledgeable card dealers and card shop owners in the business. But I wanted to offer a few thoughts of my own here first. I remain extremely optimistic about where the sports card market is going to be in 3 to 5 years. I truly believe that if you are holding a well-constructed, high-end, scarce collection of star players, whether vintage or modern, you are going to do very well in the long run. But there are a lot of key words that I just used there that you have to pay attention to. Well-constructed, high-end, scarce. We've seen cards that are the opposite of that. High population cards get beat up in price, and I fear that's going to continue to happen for some time ahead, at least with second-tier players. If you own the cards of star players, I do think we'll reach a point soon where even the high population cards that have been declining start to level out in value. And then finally, some of them will start to go back up again. But the question is, how long until we hit that bottom point? And is it worth really holding on, or should you rebalance your portfolio now? That's what I'm thinking you should do. Now, note, I also said that I'm extremely optimistic about the sports card market in 3 to 5 years. I don't exactly know what the rest of this year will hold. But what I do know is that with Fanatics taking control and the amount of money that they will soon be investing into marketing, product development, distribution, technology, data, etc., 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 this is going to lead to tremendous growth in the sports card hobby over the next 3 to 5 years. I'm not sure about the rest of this year, but I do feel very confident about where we're going to be in 3 to 5 years. So my advice to you is this: hang in there. Rebalance your card portfolio right now to favor cards that you think are going to have a lot of value and interest 3 to 5 years down the road. And if you do that, I personally believe you're going to be handsomely rewarded at that point. But what do other industry experts have to say? Do they share my thoughts, or do they have a totally different opinion? I reached out to 6 of the very best sports card dealers and card shop owners to get their take. Let's start with Joe Davis from Got Baseball Cards. You've seen him on the show a lot of times. He's an Atlanta legend who has been owning a store and dealing cards for many decades at this point. Here's what Joe told me. He said that the past 2 months were actually the biggest in the history of his store in terms of total graded card sales, but that was bolstered by a couple of really big sales. Joe says that his shop is continuing to see demand in the high-end market and the vintage graded market in any grade. Vintage rookies, regardless of grade, have been very hot. Stars like Mickey Mantle, Hank Aaron, Willie Mays, Roberto Clemente, Sandy Koufax, Nolan Ryan, Pete Rose. Lots of buyers want their cards regardless of grade, so they have been going up. The ultra-modern cards made in the last couple of years, that market continues to be a little bit soft, but more so on rookies than on stars and Hall of Famers. They're still selling plenty of graded LeBron cards, as well as cards like Kobe and Jordan, etc. from the 2000s. The biggest weakness that he's seeing is in the 2019-20 NBA rookie market, except though for Ja Morant. And he's also seeing a little bit of weakness in the 2018 and 2017 NBA rookie markets as well, mainly because there were such large volumes of those cards submitted to grading, and they are now flooding back and being sold. So what does Joe predict for the future, for the months ahead? He says that we have to get through the glut of graded cards that are hitting the market every week in large quantities as PSA catches up on their backlog. There is simply too much supply for the demand at the moment, particularly with ultra-modern cards from the last few years. Now, Joe does note that there are probably some great opportunities out there for collectors who choose wisely and buy up rookie PSA 10s during this moment where the supply is absolutely outweighing the demand. Joe notes that graded cards are still king, though, and collectors and investors are definitely veering towards graded cards. And he continues to get a lot of grading submissions, a lot of people submitting their cards for grading through our partnership with him here at Sports Card Investor, including many new submitters sending cards in for the very first time to be graded. Joe is optimistic that if you have high quality graded cards of star players and in particular legends, there will always be a strong demand for those cards in the future. Those are Joe Davis's thoughts. Thank you, Joe. And if you want to check out Joe Davis's grading service to get your own cards graded, go to sportscardinvestor.com and click on grading in the main menu bar. All right, the next person I talked to was Sharon from Black Jaded Wolf. She is a very popular dealer that deals with a lot of high-end cards. She goes to card shows across the country, and her card inventory is incredible, especially on the high end. She tells me that in general, she has seen the market cool off a little across all sports, but she's actually seen an increase in people reaching out to her for cards that are between about $5,000 and about $20,000. She feels that that range in card value is a new safe number for good investment pieces. So they're not too expensive, they're not too crazy out there, but they're also not, lower cost either. So that $5,000 range to $20,000 range is where she's seeing a lot of heat at the moment. She is seeing high population ultra-modern cards continuing to decline, but the one positive that she notes is that every time she has them, she does sell them quick. It is a liquid market. So even if you have high population modern cards, you have the ability to sell them quickly, even though the prices haven't been necessarily what any of us hope that they would be. She did also note that the hobby has had a lot of bad news since the start of 2022, just a lot of dirty laundry being waved out there, a lot of negative things on social media and YouTube. She sees this as a hobby cleansing. She thinks some people are going to leave the hobby kind of during this period, and she thinks that the core that stays is in for a great future. She said she's very confident about the future of the hobby and leadership within the hobby, and she's excited about the next phase of the sports card hobby. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Black Jaded Wolf. I talked to Jason from One Team International Agency, OTIA, and OTIA Sports. He added that the hobby has become such a true asset class that it's right there with gold and stocks, etc., which means that it's going to experience volatility from time to time, and it's going to be affected by greater forces like the economy. He thinks there's some uncertainty currently because the world financial markets are a little rocky, and therefore the card market is a little soft as people are waiting to see what happens on a worldwide scale. Jason, One Team International Agency, thank you for your thoughts. The next dealer I spoke with was Karn from the Big Three Hockey. And don't let his name confuse you, because even though Karn does deal with a lot of really high-end hockey cards, he deals with a lot of cards across all sports, and he sets up at a lot of big shows. He's got a great collection and a really good sense of the market. He had a lot of really interesting comments to share. So first of all, he echoed what the other folks have said, which is that high population ultra-modern cards are still in a state of decline. But he had an interesting observation. He said that there was a period of time where a lot of dealers were unwilling to sell those cards at reasonable prices because they were holding on, hoping that those cards would eventually go back up in value. So when you went to a card show, you would often see dealers having those high population ultra modern cards priced way above market because they just simply didn't want to sell for less and take a loss on the card. But he thinks the attitude recently has shifted and that more of these dealers are now just simply willing to cut their losses and get out of those cards and repurpose the money into other card investments. As a result of this, prices are continuing to go down as more and more supplies hitting the market, but he thinks that there will be a floor coming in the not too distant future when these cards hit an all-time low and then eventually even out. At that point in time, he thinks that it's possible that you could see positive return on investment in the mid to long term after that. He does think there will become a point in time when finally prices have stabilized on high population modern, and then they will start to go back up again. I thought that was a pretty interesting observation. Now, looking at the extreme other end of the market, some of the absolute super high-end iconic cards, but ones that there are many of out there on the market for sale over the course of months, like the 1986 Fleer Michael Jordan PSA 10 card, for example, or the Tom Brady's Playoff Contenders championship ticket cards, or even the Upper Deck exquisite LeBron James RPAs. These are super high-end cards, but to a degree, they're commodity cards, according to him, because you will see many of them hit the market over the course of the year, because it's not like they're pop 1 or pop 3, type of cards. He says these are really, really important cards to look at and what they're doing in terms of price. And recently, the value of some of those cards have even started to wane a bit. He says what happened is those cards were setting record prices for periods of time, and then you saw a high supply cycle. You saw a lot of people who owned those cards previously see those record prices and be willing to sell. As new buyers are buying those cards, though, they're buying them at a higher price point, and this establishes a new floor for what these buyers are likely willing to part with these cards for. Eventually, the people who owned the cards previously, who bought them for a lot less, enough of those people will have sold them that there won't be anyone left from that category to continue to sell those cards. The new people who bought them will have paid such a higher price that they're not going to be willing to sell them unless the cards go above the price that they paid. As a result, you'll likely find a period in the not too distant future where there's not many of those cards on the market anymore. Supply will dry up. And as a result of that, with demand still existing for those cards, prices will start to increase. And as one of those cards occasionally hits the market, it likely will start to push back up in price again. So he thinks that the long term for those types of cards is still very strong, and there's still potentially really, really good investment opportunities, even though at the moment we're in a volatile high supply cycle with some of those types of super high-end cards, of which there are many out there. Okay, he also had comments about high-end 90s basketball. He said high-end 90s basketball is hot. This was partially driven by a record sale of a 1997 BGS 9 Metal Universe Championship Michael Jordan Precious Metal Gems card. And he said this really reignited the entire 1990s basketball segment in the industry. He's seen privately that many industry veterans are scouring social media to pick up 1990s grails of their favorite players. And they're doing this in anticipation that many collectors are going back to collecting what they like and paying attention to true rarity and historically significant insert sets. So he's paying a lot of attention to those types of insert sets, such as the EX 2001 Essentials Credentials, Jambalayas, Slam Bams, Star Rubies, and the Fleer Legacy Collection. He's also paying attention to emerging markets, an area of the industry which he feels continues to have opportunity. This is one of his favorite areas to invest in. And recently, we've seen cards take off in some of these emerging markets like soccer, UFC, tennis, MetaZoo, Formula One. He now has an eye on what's going on with the expansion into the celebrity card market, everything Zero Cool is doing there, NFT cards, movie cards. He's not sure what the appetite for this segment's going to be long term, but it's something that he's paying close attention to. He also thinks it's interesting that Topps Chrome Tennis is forthcoming. He thinks that is a release, depending on price point, that could really cause renewed interest in the tennis card market and maybe a lot of growth in that market. In F1, he's seeing rare F1 cards do extremely well, while high population Formula F1 cards, the base cards, are stagnant or in some cases in decline. The $900,000 sale of the 2020 Topps Chrome 1 of 1 Super Fractor Lewis Hamilton card recently may have been surprising to some, but it was not surprising to Karn. He has seen F1 cards, the parallel type cards, the numbered cards, oranges, golds, reds, autographs, especially those in good grades, just continue to push up and up. It's hard to get good grades of those cards. He also has seen the F1 market diversify beyond just Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen. He's seen people now start to become more educated about the market and put more money into other drivers and do a little bit more prospecting. However, he's also seeing that the high population base type cards from F1 are starting to correct, are starting to head down some because of the fact now that there's more and more F1 sets coming out. So we're seeing a lot of more F1 cards in general on the market. The final thing that Karn commented on was the hockey card markets, which naturally is one of his favorite genres since he is the big three hockey. He says that the organic nature of hockey cards is unmatched in the industry. There's a lot of key cards that are locked away in collections, and historically collectors either haven't sold those cards or they have really only sold them privately. But he said that we are beginning to see Canadians who own a large market share in hockey cards become more comfortable sending their cards to American auction houses. As a result, you're seeing record prices. Those are going to get published, and more attention will follow into the market. He also commented that ESPN and Turner Sports recently released viewership data on the NHL, and viewership is up 18% year over year, which is a really good thing for the hockey card market. The hockey card market remains top heavy. You got guys like Ovechkin and Sidney Crosby, Austin Matthews, Connor McDavid, and Nathan McKinnon, who are garnering most of the attention. The market does seem to be moving away from the flagship upper deck young gun rookies and more into rarer premium serial numbered cards. At least that is what he is seeing. That was a lot of thoughts by Karn, and he has even more. He has just posted a blog post on our sportscardinvestor.com website with more details about his observations of the sports card market overall, going into more detail on all of those thoughts that he just shared. So go to sportscardinvestor.com and check out his article. Big thanks to Karn. Give him a follow on Instagram at TheBig3Hockey. All right, guys, two more dealers who I talked to. Mike from Mike's Stadium Sports Cards in Denver, Colorado, a well-known sports card shop. Mike is a great guy. He sells a lot of wax, and he says that he's seen strong sales recently with a number of sets. He does have some concern, though, that most of the 2022 Major League Baseball rookies are getting off to slow starts. So many of the 2021, 2022 NBA rookies are not household names. And the 2022 NFL draft was maybe not very inspiring either, particularly at the quarterback position, at least outside of Pittsburgh. So as a result of that, he thinks that the next few months could be really mixed. He thinks that wax prices could be less expensive in the months ahead for some of these new releases compared to prior years. But maybe that's a good thing. That's a good thing certainly for buyers, and that could reinvigorate some collectors to get back into the game of buying and whipping wax. Thank you, Mike, from Mike Stadium Sports Cards in Denver for your commentary. Finally, Chris Costa from the Card Vault and also the Fenway Card Show. Chris goes to a ton of shows, has an absolutely incredible collection of cards, and has a great pulse on the market. Chris says that he's seeing high-end remain very strong in the market, but he's noticing a shift from shiny and rare parallels to patch and autograph cards. He's seeing more of a focus there. He thinks that collectors are shifting their focus to want pieces that are directly tied to the player instead of manufactured rarity simply through serial numbered parallels and that type of thing from sets like Prism, Select, and Optic. As a result of that, he's seeing nice growth in the NT RPA market, National Treasures RPAs, especially for stars like Anthony Edwards, Ja Morant, Jason Tatum, Giannis, Steph Curry, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, etc. He does see the high population modern cards continue to struggle, but he's seeing a lot of love over in the vintage market. He's seeing a lot of high-end vintage moving really, really well. Cards like Babe Ruth and Jackie Robinson, Mickey Mantle, Bill Russell, and then of course that 1980 Topps Bird Magic Dr. J card. He's seeing a lot of activity around all of those cards right now. Thank you, Chris Costa from the Card Vault and the Fenway Card Show for your comments as well. Wow, that was a lot from a lot of great dealers. I was incredibly impressed by the insight and the thoughts. What do you think? What resonated with you from what you just heard? And where do you think the sports card market is headed in the months ahead? I would love to hear from you in the comments. Please comment and let me know what you think. And guys, if you like this video, give it a like, give our channel a subscribe, and to keep tabs on all of this, to understand what's going on in the sports card markets, a great way to start is the Sports Card Investor app. It shows you every day what cards are hot, and you can get that app for free, of course, by going into the App Store and searching for Sports Card Investor. And then if you're serious and you're investing significantly in some of these cards that we talked about today, you've got to get Market Movers because that's going to give you the most in-depth analysis of the sports card market, and it'll let you track your collection and see price changes daily. Try Market Movers for free for 7 days by going to sportscardinvestor.com, clicking on Market Movers in the main menu bar, and using promo code TRIAL. Thanks for watching, guys. Appreciate it. We'll see you back in a couple of days with our next episode.